Thursdays with ThirdPath live podcast. On every episode, you will meet thought leaders, role models, and change agents connected to the ThirdPath community. And all season long, we are exploring how you can become a work care champion for yourself, your family, and at your workplace. Hi, I'm Jessica DeGroot, and I'm the founder of ThirdPath Institute, and I'm so glad you're here today. If you're inspired by what you hear today, please share our podcast with somebody else so we can keep on growing our community of change agents and role models. You make a big difference. So I also want to get started by sharing a few important big picture slides around what we'll be looking at today. And also introduce some of our special guests. So let me get started. All right, today we're going to be looking at this concept of being a work care champion and how this connects to careers and money. And we were really pleased by Simone Stolzoff's book about this topic. He wrote about this in The Good Enough Job. And in his book, he did a great job explaining some of the workplace myths that kind of reinforce overwork. And so we're going to be exploring these myths. Some of them are, we are what we do, or your work is your work worth myth. Clearly at ThirdPath, we don't think that way. We think actually work is just one part of our whole selves. And we've got some good ideas around how to break that myth down. Another myth he explores is work can become your family and cushy office perks myth. His point is that these myths kind of reinforce long work hours where we become very work-centric in our lives. And I think what you'll see is this is a time for us to explode those myths with the idea of hybrid work and all the different kinds of work type styles that are emerging from the pandemic. Or working more means better work, or the dream job myth. And we at ThirdPath have learned a long time ago that actually when you're committed to more than just work, you find more effective ways to get your work done. And no job is a dream job. All jobs have wonderful parts and less interesting parts. And we're going to get a look at that. Most importantly, we're going to get to this topic of status equals success myth, because money can really make things complicated when it comes to these myths. And so stay tuned to the very end where we talk about how money and these myths are all connected. One reason why money gets connected is because when people are trying to balance work, family, careers, and money, that these multiple forces intersect to reinforce a problem or a solution. You can feel like maybe stepping back on some career, making some changes around how you approach your work could impact your career. You're trying to, and the family side of things, you're trying to balance earning enough money, but also having enough time for family. And you're inside of an organization where there are some strong norms around what people are doing. So it can get complicated to figure this out, but not impossible. And what we've learned over and over again, it's a lot about getting really clear about what's important to you, whether you're a part of a two-parent family, a single-parent family, or just starting your career. This is a time for you to get clear about what's important to you. And the more clear you are about what's important to you, the more you'll be able to see that work and care, whatever that care is, self-care, childcare, elder care, it shouldn't be a competing priority with doing great at work. We're going to be exploring a lot of this at our 2024 Virtual Parents Forum. Hope we'll see you there. All right, so I mentioned at the very end, we're going to be talking about money and how this all connects. And we've had Matt Becker on a few of our Thursday events, and he has this idea that we need to take a life-centered approach to finances, where we get clear about our priorities and communicate them with our partner if we have one. In fact, I like his point that we have to acknowledge what we're not reaching for around our financial goals. Maybe it's not that bigger house or that fancy car, but instead it's time for our lives. So we're going to make sure we get to this topic at the end of our session after we've heard from some of our experts. So without further ado, who's joining us today? We've got Ed Frauenheim. I know him well for all kinds of reasons, but one of them you'll hear about today is that he's the author of Reinventing Masculinity. We've also got Karen Clark Salinas, who will be joining us. She's been a wonderful Third Path integrated life advocate. She also is the founder of her own organization, Rebalance Wellbeing. And a little bit later, we're going to have Mike Jackson join us to think about what Mike and I are going to reflect back on our careers and think about what did we learn that we wish we had known at the start of our careers. So, hey, welcome, Ed, Karen. So glad you're here. You
Thanks,
are the
Jeff.
yeah. You guys are the perfect people to have for this topic because you bring such a wealth of experience, personal and professional, to this topic. So, thank you both for being here. So, I'm so glad you guys are both here. And I want to get started by talking about some of these myths. This we are what we do, or your work is your life. Clearly at Third Path, we don't think that's the case. And so, Karen, I've been thinking a lot about, you as an integrated life advocate, helping people think about these issues. This is kind of an American problem. But maybe it's a more than just an American problem where we get confused and we really have work become so central in our life. Um, what are some of the internal or external obstacles people face in trying to think in a more integrated way?
Thanks, Jessica. There are many, but not to say it can't be done. So one of the first things that comes to mind is, especially early on in our careers and maybe our building a family, we think we can make plans and that's exactly what will happen. And best laid plans, they just don't work out always. And sometimes they work out better than we might have imagined, but we need to be flexible, agile. Another thing that comes to mind, another challenge, is that careers and family can really take all that we have to give, which is a sure path to burnout. And we're not left with anything for ourselves, which means we also then don't get to show up for the work and the people in our lives that we care the most about. So we really need a measured approach, and an approach that also looks at what's the amount of energy I have to give to all my responsibilities and all the ways in which I want to grow.
Oh, wow. You just nailed two excellent points right from the start. And interestingly, that flexibility one, it's like a muscle you build because it's not like you stop learning that life throws curveballs. Life throws curveballs the whole way through. And so what you're doing is continuing to strengthen your ability to address the curveballs and maybe your repertoire of ways to address them or your resources of people who help you address them. So this flexibility one is just something you keep on growing. And I love your point about kind of assessing the capacity of both things in your life. I'm a firm believer there are times in your life when you just have to cut back on certain things. Like for me, when kids were really little, Jeff and I worked less because it was so exhausting good and fun, but exhausting to take care of infants and toddlers. Then when the kids got school age, it changed a little bit. So really great points. Thank you for getting us right on target right from the start. Ed, I wanted to ask you, given your background, how does this goal of trying to live an integrated life where work isn't so central play out differently around gender and masculinity?
Thanks, Jessica, and great to hear Karen's perspective there too. I think it's hard for men to live this integrated life because we've been socialized with what my co-author and I have called a confined masculinity. And what that means is that we've had kind of a cramped set of roles we can play that are really sanctioned in our culture. You can kind of boil them down to four. You might say that we played around with P's, the provider, protector, procreator, and a kind of an odd term, but at least it's alliterative, is potentate, someone who's powerful in the world. And so that really aligns with finding all of your self-worth through work and achieving and besting others, becoming that king of the hill of getting fame and fortune. It's less okay to be taking on roles like caregiver or spiritual seeker. Those are kind of weird, feminine, odd person type, odd guy roles. If that's changing, of course, but that's been the norm. And what that means is that it's hard to find that deeper soul level satisfaction as men, and that we so are dependent on our earnings, our job success and promotions, and it really does get in the way of living that integrative life that you're talking about.
Hmm. Soul level satisfaction. Wow. So men have a lot to gain from breaking down this confined masculinity. And what they're going to gain is this very rich life. I mean, that's one of the things that Mike and I are going to talk about later is that, here I am towards the end of my career. Whoever thought we'd get to that point, but we do. And I feel like I've lived this very rich life, rich in a soul satisfaction kind of way. Yeah.
Yeah, if I can give an example, I love that terminology. I just talked to a fella who spent 50 years playing by those rules, trying to abide by those myths, working hard, rising up the ranks, focusing on career. He had a wife and a kid. Well, after 50 years, his wife divorced him. They had a divorce. His son was suicidal, and he got fired
Oh,
by
God.
actually trying to kind of speak truth to power more and stop being. He started being more authentic and living his own integrity, and a lot of these things that he was told would work out did not really work out. So that's one extreme example, but a lot of men find in that midlife crisis or later that those myths are just that, myths, and that they should be focusing more on values, not just the value of their bank account or the deeply rich life, as you put it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what you're getting at there too is there's risk involved for all genders to do this differently, because what you can hear, and when Ed's describing this confined masculinity, it's also very aligned with who we think of as leaders, right? And who's going to move ahead in organizations is going to look like that too. And so there's some risk of pushing back on some of these norms around what you want to be as a parent, as a worker, as a leader. And there's some real risk involved. And maybe a big message we're going to say is, early career folks, the more you can kind of sniff out, are you in this organization that's going to demand all of you early on? Then you can find a different organization. We
Yeah.
hope, and not get wedded to this workplace that's going to require so much of you.
Mhm.
Wow. There's
Jessica, if I
please.
can add real quickly, I think also early career, along with those plans that the trajectory we set for ourselves, we also think that our decisions, our conversations, they're one and done. And they are so far from one and done. And there's so many opportunities to renegotiate with yourself, with your partner, with your employer. And so it brings us comfort to think we have it all figured out. But I think that that's what we're all saying here with our experiences. You don't have it all figured out. So be agile, be flexible, and talk about it repeatedly.
Yeah. Really good point there too. Wonderful, wonderful. In fact, I think we could pepper this conversation with tips for the young people listening in, young adults listening in around their careers. I always think there's a way to experiment. Like I had a board member who purposely taught a course while starting a new job, not right away, but into the new job, because what he wanted to test out was, would this job recognize that sometimes I have to go and do this course and be prepared for this course? And so he was testing out, can I be integrated right now at this workplace? I've had other people who tested out, hey, this summer, I want to work a 4-day work week. See what the reaction is. It's a pilot, it's a summer. Do you get support? Do you get resistance? So yes, there is this assumption that work should be all of us, but we can start experimenting, and we can continue to experiment to have work be an important part of us, but not all of us. There's so many more things to talk about. I'm going to jump to the next couple of myths. So this idea that work can become your family, or that there is this dream job out there. And I think that the reason why Simone is talking about this is because both of these are, again, making work central and all encompassing in our lives. And they're really, you know, they're challenging, especially in today's workplace, because I was talking to Karen about this. Many organizations are struggling. They are trying to build strong connection at work. And it turns out strong connection at work is actually a really good thing, right? There's lots of studies that show, when teams know each other well, they are more creative and they can work more effectively. So it's not that maybe we don't have to have our workplace become our family, but strong connections is something we need in workplaces. And in this new world of remote or hybrid or whatever we're all trying to figure out, many are struggling to figure out how to create that kind of strong connection. And there's a lot of beliefs that, making people come back on site is the answer. Karen, you've had a couple of months where you've played this role with ThirdPath. I really have enjoyed it. You've seen a remote team in action that's been remote since the founding of ThirdPath. Um, how important is building connection in wherever you work, in our success at work, our creativity at work, our effectiveness at work? What have you been observing with our remote team?
Well, this is the first time I've been with a fully remote team. And yet I would say I don't notice a difference in terms of the relationships. I mean, of course, it would be nice to be face to face sometimes, and there are planned opportunities for that. But we're just as creative, we're just as productive. I think we find ways to build trust with one another and also understand that we are we play additional roles than just the one we play within this organization. And so that gives us different ways to connect and make new friends and learn and all the good things that you would want from a team and that good work requires. Being face to face is not the most crucial aspect.
Yeah. Instead, I think it's really that we've learned a long time ago about ThirdPath to make it safe to talk about our work selves and our life
Yes.
as well. And that we've made time for people to invest in those life relationships. And so, we have a team member who just came back from vacation. We were all curious to hear, how was that vacation? And it was fun to hear about it. And we had stories to share about that. So what I imagine in the future of work is these remote and hybrid options allow us to invest in strong relations at work and invest in strong relationships outside of work.
Yes.
And isn't that a win-win? Any last thoughts on that, Karen, before I ask Ed a follow-up question?
I think I would add, the relationships that you have outside of work and vice versa, they help grow your skills and the richness of being in relationship with others. So I see it as a win-win to be able to participate in all these different relationships, doing different things in different places. It enhances all relationships.
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, a funny story I heard a long, long time ago was a woman leader who said she learned her best negotiation skills at the dining room table with her teenagers.
Mhm.
So anybody who has a teenager knows about that one. Ed, as we think about this transition in time and we think about dream jobs or the best perks, or who do we want to have relationships with? What will be the perks of the best organizations of the future? And this is a question I don't even have answers to, so I'm curious to see what you say.
I think there are some new ones emerging, Jessica, that do speak to the idea of a more integrated, holistic way of living. One, I think that we're seeing, came out of the pandemic and still now is greater flexibility. That there's options for job sharing, part-time jobs, sabbaticals, so that you don't have to have that 70, 80-hour week, work week, those crazy hours and constant onness. A second one, I think, has to do with opportunities for well-being and personal growth.
Mhm.
And what I mean by that is, yes, we have sometimes there's gym memberships, and those can be great, but they also can be about giving you space and a little bit of money to take a new course.
Mhm.
We had this really neat perk at a great place to work where I was, as you know, for about 7 years, which studies employee experience and has come up with the best workplace list for Fortune and other areas. We had what was called the Get a Life Fund. And every year you got close to $500 as an employee there to go get a life. Maybe it was taking a course, a cooking course. I think people did that kind of stuff. They also, I remember going on retreats, vacations with my wife, getting away from our kids. So that was another sort of kind of neat perk. Leading edge companies like Great Place to Work were doing that. And a third area I think has to do with professional growth. So at Great Place to Work, again, I'll give you an example here. There was what became called 80 conversations. That was the number of employees we had at one point, and our HR team went from having performance reviews based on your number and looking backwards mostly to basically professional development conversations. And the focus was, what do you want to do, and how does that align with the organization? What are your dreams? So you talk about dream job. This is actually dream beyond your immediate job. But how can we support you in growing professionally, and how does that fit into the organization? If it doesn't, maybe you have a plan to move forward over time out of the organization.
Yeah. Wow.
Basically, professional growth was the last one, personal growth, and then flexibility to work in ways that allow a more integrated life.
Wow. Does that resonate with me? Because that's the truth. We are whole people, and in treating us as whole people, we will grow in a way that's good for the organization and good for us. Or, and I've seen this at Third Path too, maybe someone's interests have changed and therefore going in a different direction. And then it becomes this joint support of each other in our growth. And by the way, when people leave in those circumstances, they are still such found believers in your organization, right?
They're
So
great
it's like,
ambassadors.
yeah. So it's really,
Here I am. I'm proudly talking about Great Place to Work because they did help me figure out what I wanted to do, honestly. And it goes back to what Karen said about life is not going to be the certain plan.
Yeah.
Nobody's plan is going to stay the same, and that happened to me.
Yeah.
And so I was interested in a slightly different angle on great workplaces, and we found a way to, find a third path for me. Not a great
Yeah.
place to work, but not as a disgruntled employee. It was
Yeah.
a mutual supportive departure eventually.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's really, really beautiful. And again, so many more things we could talk about here, but I hope what you guys are hearing is that, life is a journey. You're starting your career, and there's going to be many twists and turns that you can't see in the future. And, building those relationships also will sustain you in this process, right? So those relationships outside of work and at work will help you. Those conversations and relationships will help you keep on adjusting to what you're learning as you're moving along in your career. Those relationships are really critical, actually, in your ability to think big about what you want now and later when you can't even see around the corner. All right, there's one last myth I want to talk about. Working more means better work. Like this, we've known that one for a long time. So just a quick story. Ed, how have you learned, now looking back, you've worked a number of years. Yes, there's going to be times we need to work more. Maybe there's a period of time where something's happening and more hours are required. But what about this constant idea of always working at the maximum or more, and how that does or doesn't make us better workers? Ed, what do you think?
I think you're right to call that a myth, Jessica. And it certainly resonates with my own life. One of my career posts was at a technology news site, and its motto was tech news first. And what that meant for us reporters was that we were always on, essentially, or at least it was very hard to be off. And I remember when my wife and I had our first two kids, and we wanted to do a lot of equal parenting, but I might have to stay until 8 o'clock at night or later if a news story broke about Sun Microsystems back in the day buying a company, and I had to write about it. And I remember once coming home, and my wife was like, "Take the baby." He was just done. She was burnt out, fried, and I ended up leaving that prestigious path of a journalism a career to a trade publication that was more about allowing for a balanced life. And so really it was about coaching my kids in soccer for 8 years. It was for having the kind of more 40-hour work week. And it was more fulfilling to be doing that family work over time. And to your point about richer, which was the richer life, like I'm not as rich as I might be if I had followed a more high-powered career, but I feel like my life is a heck of a lot richer.
Thank you. Good. We're going to get back to that subject too, because these are important choices. Wonderful. Karen, a quick story. So should we just work long hours because that's the best way to do it?
No. The first thing that comes to mind is your brain gets tired. Your brain needs a break. And I think that the more we actually lean into taking periodic breaks, everything from 5 minutes out of 90 minutes, weekends or a day or two during the week, to then, of course, vacations, it gives us a chance to reset. And it gives us a chance to kind of pick our heads up from being heads down, plowing through whatever the task is, even tasks at home. So this isn't just, in my mind, confined to work, but at work. And it gives us a chance to touch base with ourselves, see how we feel, see what we need, have some insights. There's some great research that when we take a break, the circumstances are such that that's when some of our greatest ideas come, such as when we take a shower, or when we're out on a walk. And so we just have to really lean into giving ourselves some mental, physical breaks, come back refreshed, and the work actually gets better.
Yeah, no, I'm thinking about another board member who taught me, even during her busiest tax season, when it was normal to work a 6-day week, she made sure that one of those weekend days she really took a break because it helped her. And she saw everybody around her just grind through 7 days a week, and she felt like she was more effective. She had that reset, and maybe that smart idea about how to approach something slightly differently that you're talking about. Hey, we're going to come back to you guys in a few minutes. Wonderful. Thank you for all your insights. And next, we're going to have Mike Jackson join us. Mike and I are going to talk a little bit about what we've learned, kind of looking back at our careers over time and what insights we can share. Thanks. Hey, Mike. So glad you're here.
Hello, Jessica.
And I thought you would be a fun person to do this with because we both have traveled down this work and family journey. And we've both taken very different approaches to how we've traveled down this journey. But I joke that we've kind of landed in the same room because we've realized, whoops, hey, we can really create lives and support people to create lives where they live a more holistic approach. And in your story, it also includes how healthier that can be for us too. So when you listen in and you think about, looking back at your career, what have you learned about how to help younger people think differently about this? What did you learn in your journey?
Well, the first thing that I'll start with goes back to the money part, really.
Yep.
I worked in banking for years. That's where I pretty much raised my family in that area. But just trying to make a living, I forgot about everything else. And that balance, I lost sense of that. And looking back on it, Budgeting is so important, and don't take for granted the job that you may have. It's just going to fit your life throughout your life.
Yeah.
And so when we take job, we basically are trading dollars for hours. And unfortunately, when we go out and buy the new car, we buy the big house, et cetera, we're expecting that the lifestyle that we're tapping into, that job is going to be able to provide it. But life goes in quarters, I like to say. You go first quarter, that right out of college, 25 to 35, and then you move into the second quarter, 35 to 45, and then 45 to 55. By the time we start getting to that 65, I mean, we're dealing with so much. And a lot of times we may be still 10 years into a job because we've had to continually leave jobs, and continually that snowball just keeps on moving into a point to where it just doesn't fit our lifestyle. And so I think we have to be very intentional. I don't advise young people to do what I did, which kind of quit cold turkey. And I started an integrative health career and went back to school, got my degree in holistic health sciences, and got my integrative coaching, certificate and all that. And what I learned was like, wow, why didn't I learn this earlier? I would have better managed money. I would have better managed my time. And I didn't necessarily have to quit my career. I would have just approached my boss a little bit differently. And I would approach my boss with more of an intention of, okay, this is a partnership. This is just not me wanting a job and you giving me a salary. It's a partnership. So I do fatherhood training, and one of the programs that I follow and share with folks through the program is a book by Mark Perlman, and it talks about the styles of power. And with those styles of power, it really applies to relationship. A power over style versus a power to style. And I may have talked to you about that in the past, but just a few things about the power over style. It's a dominant style. It's a win-lose style. It's a fear-based style. It's a me versus you. It's a fight or flight style. So if you're working for a company that has those kinds of styles, it's not going to fit who you really want to be throughout your life. You want a company that's going to be cooperative. You and also Karen kept repeating the word, and it made me think about all this. Win-win. The power to style is a win-win style. When you're working for a company, it's a nurturing style. I even heard Ed mention on the call, and he was basically, just talking about flexibility. That applies to a nurturing win-win company that understands. Okay. And so my mom passed away just recently. I'm actually in Huntsville, Alabama. My daughter just had a baby yesterday. And I think about, thank you. I think about the time I was able to be there for my mom. Working for a company, I would have struggled with that time, that flexibility, being in leadership, to be able to take that time away. So the past 14 years or 12 to 14 years being in an integrative career, it's like, okay, well, how can I coordinate my schedule? How can I budget to where when I can be here, be with my daughter, be in the room as she wanted me to? I think about that takes a special type of intentionality, integrated intentional reality. These are phrases that I haven't even heard out here, but we have to apply these words to being very intentional about the life that we want to create. And I think it's important to do that. But unfortunately, we get out of college sometimes and we got college loans, or we start a family quicker than what we anticipated. And boom, we kind of like trying to play catch up. And then we get into the emotional game. We got to buy a big house. We got to buy a big car. And now you're kind of trapped. Okay.
Yeah.
So I think
Wow.
we have to, organize our thoughts accordingly. So I'll end it there.
Yeah, no, that is, you've said it all so well. And, again, I think you really are showing, even, let's say, maybe here's another message. Let's say you get off track and you get sucked into an organization that has that win-lose approach. Here's Mike Jackson letting you know you can make change at any time.
Right.
You can make change at any time. I joke, especially if the challenges around balancing work and kids, we've got kids for a while. So if we get it wrong the first year or the second year, we can keep on changing and get it right later on.
That's right.
So, and I love your point about intentionality. Because yes, there are these external forces coming at us that are saying, you have to do it this way. You have to get the big house. You have to get the big job, even if it's a win-lose culture. That you can pay attention to what's important to you, and you can find people around you who will support you to hold on to those goals and then keep on reaching for them. I'm so glad you put money on the table, because that's what we want to do next. I want to get everybody back on camera with us, and we're going to talk a little bit about
If
money.
Mike put some money on the table we can take. I'm ready. I'm ready for that money, Mike.
Hey, Ed, we're holding on to it a little bit tighter these days.
Well, I want to reinforce that idea that I put up at the very beginning about this life-centered approach to financial goals. Matt Becker's a wise person, and he taught me this concept a long time ago. And this could be something you do as an individual. Although if you do end up partnered, obviously this is very powerful to do with your partner, is to start thinking about, what's really most important to us. And by the way, we had this wonderful conversation with some young adults around early career decisions and how they were learning to share the mental load at home. And, what I should have said to them too is, hey, think about your financial future too. And how do you want to set some priorities there around your financial goals? Matt Becker even gave me some ideas around what to do around if you're dealing with some challenges around debt, and how to kind of manage debt, which we can talk about or not talk about at some point. We'll see. But most importantly, what Matt talked about was get clear about your priorities. If you have a partner, communicate them with your partner so you can get on the same page around these goals. If you don't have a partner, I'd say find a good friend, find a family member, get it outside of your own head what your priorities are. So it's not you privately thinking about this. And then my favorite thing he tells you to do, he says, acknowledge what isn't on your list. Because I think the world tells us we should want X, Y, and Z, and that can get us into a trap. But if we get really clear about what we really want, in my case, it was plenty of time for life, then Jeff and I could make better decisions around how to set up some financial goals around this more shared vision of a life-centered approach to finances. Ed, I know you've really thought a lot about this, because again, I think this comes around with masculinity and being the provider, right?
Yeah.
What have you learned around thinking differently around finances, and maybe connected to masculinity, or just your own personal lessons learned too?
I would say, I loved how, Mike, you talked about those pressures to get the house, get the car, keep rising up. I think it's really an opportunity these days for us men to challenge those assumptions, those guides, those confinements that we've had. And I love that idea that you mentioned, Jessica, of acknowledge what isn't on your list. And for my wife and myself, it's been the big house. Like we live in a 1-bedroom apartment here in San Francisco, where we've raised our 2 kids. Everybody's in a loft bed. It's like bookshelves on every wall. And that's been fine. A lot of people have come to our house and like, how do you live in this house with 4 people in 1 bedroom? And it was hard during COVID, but it's doable, And the other thing I would say is, this is not just for men, but I think men often, they want to have that stable provider role. And I think we underestimate how much risk there is in so-called stable jobs. Especially, maybe it's become clear to folks over the last couple decades, but those jobs that we once thought we could be in for years and rise up. And a lot of younger people are choosing to, they're job hopping and looking to get different career experiences. But even doing that, the path of so-called stable jobs is really not that stable, given how companies are so quick to restructure, lay off, get acquired or merge. And there's less risk in pursuing your authentic calling than we think. And when we do the thing that really speaks to our soul, I'll keep coming back to that soul stuff, we often find ways to make it work. Mike, I'm looking at you. It sounds like you have done that in changing from the banking career to what you're doing. I've done something similar and going off on my own. And yes, there's more financial insecurity, but there's a deeper reward that comes with that risk of going on your own and doing the thing that really calls you.
Well, or what I hear too is because sometimes as a young person, it's hard to know what's calling you. But what I
Yeah.
hear is continue to pay attention to where you are right now and what feels exciting to you and investing in that because of the coursework or the time you're taking outside of work to invest in these things that continue to be interesting to you. You're developing your whole self, and your whole self will be able to rally around the unexpected more quickly than if you've just focused narrowly on this one work solution. You've invested more holistically, and that's going to actually help you be able to be more resilient for the
Yes.
unexpected. Wonderful. Wonderful. Karen, I know you had some insights around some of this, how money plays out in this. And when you look back, any things you want to share around this?
Well, sure. I have to say, just thinking about even the house, the size of all of those things really resonates with me. And I've had the opportunity to talk with people younger than I am, whose kids are maybe just starting in school, and they're wondering, does everybody need their own bedroom with a desk? And like, kids are small; they don't need a lot of room. And they are likely going to be around a kitchen or dining room table doing homework. And that is likely maybe the way you're going to want it. So it is a real myth that we need, all of this space. And the other part of it is that it's so easy to get trapped in a big monthly budget, long mortgage, not quite as long car payments. And then what do you do if a family member really needs some other resource that you didn't plan for because you didn't know it was going to be needed? And I think again, I'm going to use the word agile. You wanna spend beneath your means, so that you can be agile. And if you end up with extra, then invest in experiences for yourself as an individual, for you and your partner, or for the family. And that's a great way to spend money.
Yeah, wonderful, wonderful. Mike, I'm going to get to you in a second too, but I've seen this thread around houses come up. And I think this, what actually was an old school idea for many, many centuries is resurfacing, which is, hey, uh, extended families living in the same roof together, siblings sharing a house together. I've even heard of grandparents and younger people living and housing together. So that saves us money, but it also expands our relational capital and support. So I think there's ways, and certainly Matt Becker's the one who would tell you, don't buy a house right away. Maybe it's renting. It lets you have more agility, as Karen's talking about. So there's definitely a theme around thinking differently about where we live and how we live to make it more affordable. Love all this conversation. Mike, what would you add? And then I have another slight direction I'll take us in.
Well, thanks, Jessica. I don't know if the connection kind of skipped there for a second. You said, what would I add to that? I would
Just
say,
around money.
there's this phrase. Yeah, there's always this phrase that circles around, I think, with young people that get caught up, and the phrase is get a job, right? And to me, I would change that phrase to figure it out. Instead of just saying get a job, tell them to figure it out. What does that mean? Well, make them ask themselves some thought-provoking questions. What kind of life do I want to live? Right. And so when you say get a job is very, it's very small-minded thinking in this day and age, because nowadays so many young people, they don't want to just work. They have their own businesses on the side. This is the hustle culture for sure, and so it's getting less and less important to just have a job to try to fit into that box. So figure it out. What kind of life you want to live? There's a whole minimalistic movement. After my kids became older, I sold my house and we downsized. My wife and I moved into an apartment. We sold over 70% of what we owned. And as a result, we both got healthier. We felt freer. We were able to save better. I mean, it's just like, man, wow. Okay, why didn't I? Because I was in that culture of just work, work, work. And everybody, all my coworkers, we all living the same life. There is this integrative life, but it tends to be the lonely road. And so it takes a lot of courage to go that path. But again, I think that's kind of how Third Path got started, right? Well, it's just like we got to figure out something new, right? It's not just this nuclear family, nuclear lifestyle anymore. We have to get creative, and so just figure it out and ask those key questions that are centered to you and you alone.
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, you're reminding me about one more thing, which I'm going to share, that I'm going to show a couple of last slides, because believe it or not, we're getting close to the end of our time together. But I was thinking about this young woman who's going to be part of our parents forum. She is not a parent, but she wants to join the parents forum because what she realized was, I want to talk to parents who are doing things in an innovative way, so I can think ahead about what would this look like and what are the different, I'm looking around me and I'm seeing people solving it in very small boxes, and I want a wider array of how I can think about work and family in a way that feels closer to what is important to me. So I love your point, Mike. It's like, figure it out. Start talking to some people who are doing it differently. Learn how they did it differently. Interview somebody who looks like they're doing a life that you want. Figure out what they did to make that happen. I think that's a really great way to pick up on some thoughts and ideas. I'm going to check if anybody has something they're dying to say. Otherwise, I'm going to put up a couple of last slides.
I would just add to that, figure it out. Just keep that word figure in your head. Put a dollar sign to it. Okay.
Cool.
And figure out, what do I like to do and how can I make money doing it? Make that a priority more so than just get a job, right? Let's kind of kill that phrase, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. And how do I avoid and I need to have all these things to make it work financially, versus these are what's important to me, and therefore I don't have to have so many of those things that make it difficult to work. It's that balancing act. It's a little bit about,
Absolutely.
in fact, Karen and I were talking about, it's a little bit about thinking about the income you need, and it's a little bit about thinking about the expenses you have and getting smart about both sides of that equation.
Can I add a tweak to Mike's thing? How about figure your figure out?
Figure your figure
out.
Figure
your figure. Yeah.
It also relates to how you want your body to look too. But there you go.
Great.
And that's a slippery slope. That's a slippery slope, just real quick, because it's like in working in banking. I mean, when I used to I owned a mortgage company for several years, and we'd sit down and I think they train you to, hey, see how much money both mom and dad makes together and get them as much house as they can get, right? But when I became integrative in coaching, I tell them, I said, hey, try to see what you can find. Of course, that's gotten even harder to do today with the housing prices, but see what you can afford on one income, right? And that was always good advice coming up in the early 2000s. But now it's like, man, wow, how do you, it's gotten so much harder. So it's more pressure. If someone gets sick, your degree of difficulty, or if somebody gets sick and have to stop working or whatever, it just puts families in a much harder position. So we got to be proactive with all that thought about figuring that out.
Yeah. Wonderful. Great. I'm going to put a couple slides up, and then you're going to hear from everybody one more time. They're going to give us one more piece of advice to think a little bit about when you're starting your career. What is it that we need to be considering? So look for their advice in 1 second. So, as I've mentioned, we have this amazing parents forum coming up around the corner. This is our last week actually to register for this event, but we're going to have it every 2 years. It's an event for parents who really want to think outside the box around how they can approach work and family. And if you want to continue the conversation, there's lots of ways for us to stay connected to each other. You can join our Trailblazers Facebook group. You can join us on our next Thursdays with ThirdPath event. You can follow us on social media. And as you can see, we are a nonprofit, and we've been very successful in building a community of role models and change agents. So help support our wonderful free resources and expand our reach by making a donation today. Okay, folks, I really appreciate the wisdom you've shared. I really appreciate that you're out there being such good role models and supporting people to think differently. Change sometimes feels a little slow. But with people like you out there in the community making this possible, we can really lend a helping hand. And so maybe I'll start with you, Karen, then Ed, then Mike. One more word of advice as you think about people starting their careers and wanting to reach for this integrated solution. What's a word of advice you have?
Well, first, I wholeheartedly second Mike's mention of the word intention. It takes intention. So I'd also rephrase it to say, take charge of your work-life choices and to ask yourself, as you feel yourself pushing harder, 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 ask yourself, do I really want this myself? Or am I doing it because somebody else is expecting it of me? And then just whatever the answer, at least you will have asked the question. And you have to periodically do that. Set a schedule for yourself and ask yourself, is this what I really want? Am I doing it the way I want?
Wonderful. It is something we need to keep on doing because life keeps on changing. Such good, solid advice, Karen. Thank you. That's wonderful. Ed, what do you think?
Mine will sound a little similar to Karen's, but I think just a reminder that riches in the bank don't necessarily lead to riches in the soul. So start early to live the whole life you want to lead.
Wow. I'm getting like goosebumps listening to you guys. Thank you. And I mean that seriously. Wonderful. Mike, a last thought.
Yeah, I would just say, just understand your power and then the style of power that you want to bring to the table, because we know companies can change your mindset and when you have to check the boxes and whatnot. So, but just understand any company we decide to work for, it should be a partnership, and then understand the style of power that they're using as well and partner with them. But make sure that you're not, cutting yourself short. Create
Yeah.
a win-win versus a win-lose relationship.
Yeah, because it really, in a great company, that's a great place to work for. You will feel this partnership approach. That's great. Hey, thank you, everybody. That was really a wonderful set of ideas to share for generations to come. So great being there.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.